This is AUGforums.com Real Talk, an unfiltered, independent perspective on Acumatica Cloud ERP. My name is Tim Rodman, and I want to mention three things in this pre-recorded intro before we get started. First, thank you to our sponsors. Our first sponsor is Repay. Repay offers omni-channel integrated payment solutions for Acumatica users. Whether you are making B2B payments or collecting them, Repay is your full-service payments provider. Power up your payments to empower your business and accelerate the AP and AR payment flow through one seamless integration. Our second sponsor is DataSelf. DataSelf Analytics is a revolutionary reporting solution that enables organizations to make the most informed decisions faster and easier than ever. It uniquely simplifies business intelligence, empowers anyone to build and access dashboards, and delivers critical business insight when and where you need it. Our third sponsor is Velixo. Velixo is an award-winning provider of Excel-based reporting solutions for Acumatica. With Velixo, you can build financial, project, and other business reports in Excel with live Acumatica data in just a few minutes and get the answers you need. If you know Excel, you can do it. Please take a minute to support this podcast by clicking each one of the sponsor banners located at augforums.com/sponsors. Our sponsors track clicks, and every click helps to support this podcast. The second thing I'd like to mention is that I'm always looking for victims. Guests. If you use Acumatica in any capacity, no matter how small, I'd love to talk with you. Check out augforums.com/podcast and click the link near the top of the page to learn more about being a guest on the podcast. Third and finally, I'd love to see you listed on my Rolodex. Check out augforums.com/Rolodex to find out who else is using Acumatica and read the instructions at the top to see how you can add yourself to the list. All right, that's it for the pre-recorded intro. Let's get started. Today is Tuesday, March 30th, 2022, and this is episode number 79, Bettie Heyns, Acumatica and Global Supply Chain Consultant. Bettie, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for the invite.
Well, hey, maybe let's start off with your brief origin story. Maybe tell us where you grew up, where you went to school, and what your first job was out of school.
All right, sure. That was a while ago. I grew up in a very small town and on a farm, an ostrich farm. And I went to boarding school in Oudtshoorn. The farm is close to Calitzdorp, which is in the Western Cape of South Africa. Studied at Stellenbosch, did my master's degree in supply chain optimization, logistics. And my first job, that was at a food bank in South Africa. They offered me like a 6-month contract just to review their supply chains, optimize the different processes, look at their warehouses. So it was really an entry-level job, which didn't pay a lot. I think they only covered my diesel, and it's not profit, of course. But for me, it was fine. I just wanted the experience. So,
You started off in supply chain, and, around, I guess, what year was that when you're starting off? So we can kind of get a timeline of when you get into ERP.
I'm going to have to search that for you. That was a while ago. I completed school in, how do I not remember this? Sorry. Like I mentioned to you when we did the Acumatica thing as well, it was action camera blank. But it was a lot of fun for me.
Yeah, and I'll drop a link. So we're going to get to that. And there's a Acumatica success story that you're part of. And I'll put a link to that on this episode so people can go look at that. But I see, so I'm scoping out your LinkedIn profile. I see 2010/2011.
Yes,
for school.
I did that while I was busy with my honors degree. So in South Africa, you have a 3-year degree, then you have to do honors, and then only you can do a master's. So I was doing that. I was studying on the plane rides between Cape Town and Durban, Johannesburg, Bloemfontein, Port Elizabeth. Every second evening I was sleeping in a different city. I had an absolute blast. We had a fun project team that had to revamp the whole food bank supply chain and also the systems and everything that went with it. But it was non-profit, like I mentioned. So it had to be as cheap and as efficient as possible.
But you were on a lot of plane flights, you said.
Yeah, I took.
And you were telling me before we hit record, maybe that's where you're at now. But where you're at now, you're like 7 or 8 hours from an airport. Were you that far from an airport when you were flying a lot?
No, when I lived in, when I studied at Stellenbosch, University of Stellenbosch. So the closest airport I think was an hour and a half away. So it's a lot closer to where I'm now. I'm now in the Southeast Free State, between Aliwal North and Betuli. So I think people are going to have to go Google it. I had to go Google it when I met my husband, who comes from here. So.
And you're on a lot of flights. And did you find that being on a flight is a good time to study? Like, do you study well in motion?
Yeah, I kind of had to. I wanted to complete my honors within 1 year. So whenever there was a flight or I had to wait for a flight, and I mean, it's 2 hours, 1 hour flights that you have to do something with your time. So yeah, I found it very handy.
I feel like I'm kind of similar. I actually almost do it by choice. Like sometimes if I really need to work through something, I just need to go for a drive or do something to get in motion. Like I don't think as well when I'm stationary for some reason, but even like a flight somewhere, some kind of trip where you're going from point A to point B. I don't know. There's something that for me at least brings focus to things. I don't know why. It's kind of strange.
Yeah, I mean, in 2010 there wasn't any Wi-Fi on flights, so you couldn't get interrupted. Once you sat down, that was an hour or two that you could completely focus. So yeah, I think that's maybe had helped with the studying.
So you do that for, looks like less than a year, where you start off there.
Yeah, it was a 6-month contract.
And then when do you turn the corner? So that's around 2010, 2011. I guess at that time, did you even know what ERP was, or were you just focused on the supply chain side of things?
I was more focused on the business flow. So does the work that everyone has to do on a specific day, does it make sense for that person? So it's rolling up sleeves and doing the work, sorting the food, standing next to the person doing the job, seeing how you can make it quicker and easier. So it was more on the practical side, on the warehouse design side, so more industrial engineering side than really the ERP side. And then, in 2011, I met and married my husband, who is a programmer. So he kind of got me into the thing of, listen, you look at Excel and Visual Basic, and the more he spoke about C# and all the different programs he was running on, the more interested I got.
That's interesting. I like that you started off in a sense without the computer, because for me, I came at it from the computer side, and I feel like a lot of people equate the two. You know, they look at the computer as being the process, but maybe talk about some of the differences. One thing I've learned since coming at it from the computer side is that they are different things, that there is a physical component, there is a change management component, there is a how to motivate people to take something on new. There's a whole soft side that has nothing to do with the computer. Maybe talk about how you bridge those two worlds, or do you see them as being more similar than I do?
Well, you don't have a system without people, right? So someone has to enter the data, someone has to maintain it, look at it, make decisions from it. I think you actually start with people first. Well, that's from my perspective, at least. You can see the same thing when you go live with the system. If the people if everyone hasn't accepted the system yet or understand why they need to do it and have the complete buy-in, then you can have, no matter how well you've set up the system, you can really still have a failure at go line. So I always prefer understanding the role and the key issues that people have before I make a suggestion on which system to use. Because of course there's different solutions for different problems. And especially with the different categories, especially within supply chain, for example, you have even when I work for UPS, you can have small pack, and you can have contract logistics, which is warehousing. So there's a difference to how you operate trucks, the logistics side, to how you operate a warehouse. And if you don't understand the people who work in it, then yeah, the system can't really help.
I like that. I totally agree that. Like what you said, start with the people first. So is it that, when you go in, let's still stay on the supply chain side of things. When you go into a company, is it, how do you get to know? Is it about getting to know people individually? Is it about understanding the mission statement of the company and the culture of the company? How do you start with people first?
Sure. Well, I've transitioned from being a customer to a consultant. So I think I was privileged to have already that type of background when we did the design and linking the system to what they needed. So I understood that part of the business already, because I think I was working for them already for 3 years when we implemented the new system. And then for my new customers, we normally say write down your 10 biggest problems, and then from there you can start a discussion, and from that discussion you actually learn, okay, what are the frustrations, what are the wins that they enjoy, and what are the key things you need to focus on. You can have a mission statement that looks great on the wall, but it needs to be something that people live. So, and that you normally get from the admin people, so the admin staff, your order clerks, your drivers, your security staff, your kitchen, the people who make the coffee, to see if what's on the door really lives down, and then you work from there up.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, you don't get it from management. You have to, or at least you have to stress test what you hear from management to the with the people who actually do it.
The 10 biggest problems, and the staff on the ground, they tell you what's actually going on, and then it's nice to also bring those two together.
So you start getting involved on the computer side. I'm going to jump ahead then to your UPS, looks like around 2013 to 2015. Maybe talk about the UPS side. Was that computer related, or was that still more focused on the softer side of supply chain?
I think that was the first time that I saw what a system that was built specifically for a company, how powerful it can be, because everything that you needed was there. Everything just worked. So there I worked as a solutions and implementations analyst. So new companies would bring their business to UPS and would decide, okay, they want to outsource and no longer want to do their own logistics. So they were looking like for a full end-to-end solution. Again, a system would play one big part of it. And but they would look at warehousing, the transport, how to bring all of that business over. It could be a new company that was deciding to relocate to the Netherlands, or getting a foot in the Netherlands, or I was working in that part of the world at that point in time. But it was still more processes, more people. I think my first real systems was at Pharmadynamics, I think. Yeah.
So before I get to that, I want to ask you a little bit more on the UPS side.
Yeah.
You kind of drew that, maybe not line between the two, but that comparison between the two, the warehouse side of things and the transport side of things. Is that generally kind of the two areas of supply chain, like within your walls versus outside your walls, or is that a good broad way of looking at it?
So you have your you've got your trucks and the brown trucks that you see everywhere. You've got the UPS warehouses, and there's also the international freight. So sea freight, air freight, those type of freight. That's normally how I would classify it in those three. My main thing was always on the warehousing. It's one of the sections I really enjoy. Rebuilding a warehouse, putting up new racking, designing the processes that a picker should walk through in the warehouse to make it more optimal, the pick, pack, ship. The transport side is also interesting, especially in South Africa, with our unique roads and unique situations here. But yeah, I would normally classify it in those three.
On the warehousing side, then, how do you paint the picture for someone between the existing process and the process you want to go through? Like, what practical tool are you using? Visio diagrams, or are you just getting on a whiteboard? What like physical things do you use to paint that picture for someone so they can see the old and the new and help that light bulb go off for them that the new is going to be an improvement and not just something different?
Well, I think you first have to walk in that person's shoes, literally. So what I normally did is I put on my safety boots and then spent a week next to someone, a picker, a packer. I think trust is one of the main things. So you need to show them that firstly you understand why they're doing something in the way that they're doing it. So if you can't optimize a process until you fully understand the current one. So we would take the day's orders, print everything out, and then start picking. And during the picking process, you would ask them questions. So not in a boardroom, everything at once. Normally, people who enjoy manual physical labor, they don't like boardrooms, they don't like meeting rooms. And I'm just really, that's a broad statement. But what I found is if you do a one-on-one with those people, you can actually learn a lot more. So they'll teach you what they find easier. So if they have to physically, if it's not an automated warehouse and they have to physically walk the aisles, they have tips and tricks on how, if it's also not system driven, they'll tell you, okay, I know this product is in that section. So my question to them is always, if you're not here, who would know? So we would normally start off there. They would teach me what they do. And then I would just continue probing and asking questions. So would it be easier if you did it this way? And then they would go, oh, we actually never thought about it. Or no, we did think about it. Look at this. That doesn't make sense. To get up to position number 7 in a warehouse, every time to cart around either a trolley with stairs on it is a lot more difficult than just to take a heister once off and then do all your height picks. So yeah, I think starting with the people again, circling back that one, that's normally how I did it.
And you said you would do that for a whole week?
Yeah, it depends on what time we were given and allowed. So if it was a customer who was preparing to outsource, then of course they would say, well, you have 1 or 2 days. But if it was a current operation that we were automating or automizing within the one of the current warehouses, then yeah, I would normally prefer a week. It gives you enough time to look at the process and not to rush anything.
And would you be there like with a clipboard taking notes, or would you kind of just take it all in and then go take notes afterwards? I mean, how do you capture all that knowledge, that overwhelming amount of knowledge that's coming at you?
It also depends on the persons you work with. Some people don't like a teacher looking over their shoulder making notes. But yeah, I would normally ask the permission and then just do a couple of notes. So have a small little pocket book and then do a full summary on a computer later on. Or I would put up my laptop somewhere in the warehouse and then just circle back to it, make a couple of notes if I see something key, or ask them if I can take a couple of pictures.
Interesting. Yeah, I asked because I've tried different things as well. And I find that even if it's okay if I take notes, I'm sitting there taking notes, sometimes I'm not processing, I'm more transcribing if I get too much into note taking. So that's why I was curious on that. It does kind of depend on the situation, not just on their side, but also on your side in terms of what is the best way to actually retain everything that's coming at you.
Well, it's easier when you do the work with them and physically hold one of the scanners and process one order. So they'll have their own order and you can have your own one, and then you process it from printing the order all the way through. then you take a lot more in than just noting down what they're doing.
So you got those, you're building these skills of like how to go in and understand a process, understand how things really work in a company. Then the next one was pharma dynamics. You said that was the first time you really started getting into the computer side. What was different then about that job, and what kind of things did you do there?
I think I then moved from an analyst type of role more to a supply chain manager and logistics manager type of role. So at that point in time, I realized that for me to make an accurate decision, I needed the data. And as an analyst, you're used to gathering the data, and you had all of this, and you could make suggestions to people on what decisions to make. Once you step more into a managerial role, you actually want someone feeding that information to you. So at that point in time, Pharma Dynamics went through this amazing growth. We were one of, well, they said they wanted R1 billion worth of sales at that year end, which was now, I think, 2016. And we wanted to rush to get to that number. But that meant that we always had to be in stock, and we always had to be on time. And especially the pharmaceutical section, you've got short expiry dates. We're far from where all the suppliers are located. You've got all these regulatory requirements that they had to go through, and just tracing the information on how long it takes from placing your order, going the full leg to having it available for a doctor to actually give to someone or prescribe to someone. And that was information I was really interested in. So at that point in time, we were working with the team doing our freight forwarding, just starting to gather this information so we could we use NetStock, and that was one of the key systems that we used just for forecasting. And every month we would sit with this whole Exco team. We had to explain where the products were, what the next target is, and when it will be in country, where are we at risk of running out, where the sales team should push, where they should hold back, those type of things. And if you sit in a big room with a big audience, you realize, well, I actually need the data to not just they can trust what I'm saying, but I also need to make sure that I can prove everything that I'm saying. So at that point in time, we really dug in, and we tracked everything from time of order placement with suppliers to time it has to spend in different warehouses to time that the QA team, the quality team, needs to check everything, to submitting it to the South African regulatory team to approve it, customs processes, all of it, and then getting it finally for people to use. And I'm happy to say that we did quite a good job with it. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
And also in a supply chain manager role, you're now in-house, whereas like UPS is more of a consulting role, I would imagine, right? Now you're digging deeper into things because you're just working for one company. Is that right?
Yeah. And it's also, you can feel the difference in responsibility. If you're consulting, and especially if you're an analyst, there's always a project manager or someone higher up the chain who can cover for you. If you're a supply chain manager, it's you, and it's you alone. So I had some amazing mentors, especially within Pharma Dynamics as well. I think they also honed my softer side of things, or sharpened my skills on softer side. And they also really dug into how important people are to make all of this work. So your relationship with your freight forwarder, with your supplier, with the staff, with the Exco team, if everything works and gels together, you can really make something amazing. So yeah, but within the supply chain manager, if you don't have the data and you don't know how to plan, then it does create a big problem.
You also mentioned NetStock in there. Is that the same NetStock that integrates with Acumatica?
Yes, correct. I was actually happy when I started my Acumatica training to see that NetStock's part of it, or that there is an integration. So yeah, and later on, Pharma Dynamics was also bought out by the Lupin Group. They're now part of Lupin, which is one of the biggest Indian or biggest global, but they're based in India, pharmaceutical companies. So then they actually went on to SAP. So I was lucky enough to be part of that prep work before we went on to SAP. But yeah, then we relocated to here in the Free State before I could be part of the final implementation. So yeah, it was something I said I always want to do, is be part of a huge implementation.
What did they move from? What were they when they were using NetStock before SAP? What did they? What ERP were they on? Do you remember?
I think
maybe a Sage product, or
yeah, I think it was a Sage product. I have to go dig back, but I think it was Sage. But
so
of course, they had to comply with their global standards, and at that point in time, Lupin was already on SAP, so they just brought their new subsidiary in.
Yeah, it's very much a do things the way we do things type of implementation, an SAP one, right?
Yeah, I think they gave a lot of freedom because the Pharmadynamics company was run by a brilliant entrepreneur. That's also what attracted me to go to this company in the first place. And yeah, his way of thinking, I think, is what made Pharmadynamics in South Africa. So when he said, okay, he'll be part of the Lupin group, he said there's some key things that they need to make sure still works in order for this to grow in South Africa. So I think they did give a lot of, they allowed the South African, the Pharmadynamics market to make some key decisions, and then they just went with it.
So then from there, it sounds like your next job was due to a move. Maybe you would have stayed at Pharma longer if you hadn't moved. Is that true?
Yes, absolutely loved it. It was a great team. Really enjoyed working with everyone there. Had a great team under me as well. So yeah, if we didn't move from Cape Town to in the Free State, then yeah, I think I would have stayed there a bit longer.
And since I don't know South Africa very well, I know Cape Town's like down on the bottom left. Free State is somewhere in the middle. Like how far is it between the two?
It's about a 10-hour drive, so 1,200 kilometers.
Okay. And
do you know where Lesotho is?
What's that?
Do you know where Lesotho is, the country within South Africa?
I don't. I'm going to pull up Google Maps though while you describe it. Tell me about it.
Well, I'm about 100 kilometers from the border from Lesotho, so it's a small independent country within South Africa. They mainly speak Sotho, and yeah, wonderful place to visit. So if you ever do a trip to South Africa, I would recommend it.
So that's why I keep seeing Free State on that success story, and I think you've mentioned it. It's actually more like an independent country. Is there any relationship to South Africa, or just happens to be landlocked by South Africa?
The Free State is a province. South Africa has different provinces, and yeah, Free State is just one of the provinces. But Lesotho is a different country within South Africa that's landlocked.
But now you're in the Free State, so you are in South Africa.
Yes, I'm in South Africa.
The name Free State, though, do they think of themselves as being like more of an independent province than others, or is Free State just the name of it?
Yeah, there's a very, very long history with the Free State, which you might need to go and Google. Yeah.
It sounds maybe a little bit like Texas. Texas always prides themselves on being able to break away from the United States whenever they want. It sounds maybe similar.
No, they're fully part. It used to be the Orange Free State because South Africa was one of the Dutch colonies. And then they took the orange away when we became a republic. But my husband would know the history a lot better than I would, because I'm from the Western Cape, so I would be seen as part of the colony, which is where most of the Dutch people settled.
And, you know, before we started recording, you said you live on a farm and it's 7 or 8 hours from the nearest airport. I mean, what's it like? Is there a lot of people around or just a lot of animals around?
Well, it's 7 or 8 hours from the closest international airport. Bloemfontein, which is the biggest, one of the biggest cities in South Africa, is 196 kilometers from me. But yeah, where I live, my closest neighbor is 10 kilometers away, and I can see only animals and hills and grass. That's about it that I can see from my office window.
So you really put the remote in remote work where you're at now.
Yes.
But your first job there, so now, we're going to get to the Acumatica side shortly, but your first job there, is it Dukatole, or how do you pronounce that? Dukatole.
Yes.
And that's what I'll link the Acumatica success story to. Tell us about, did you get there before Acumatica or after the implementation? How did you then start getting involved there with Acumatica?
Dukatole had a horrible site implementation in March, before I started in October that year. So I started in October 2018, and March 2018 they had a kind of a big boom. So also run by husband and wife entrepreneurs who just took the market by storm. They started with a couple of brick manufacturing companies, and then had this big boom where they bid on companies that were in business rescue, a construction company, and then two other brick making facilities. And they're all 2 hours away from each other. So at that point in time, they needed a system to support them. So they picked Sage. And yeah, as I mentioned, I wasn't there at that point in time, but what I understand from everyone, nothing was working. And when I joined in October, or just before October, when I had my initial interviews, I remember also telling my husband, I would never find a job that would be stimulating where we live, because we're so far from everything. And this one, it came over my path and said, well, let's give it a try. So I remember sitting in the interview asking them, so your systems, everything is working, and you can print with a click of a button, you can print your balance sheet, your P&L, your stock situation. And they just went, no. Like, no, but you guys, you've been live on your new system, as I understood from the interview, from beginning of March. And they just said, no, they're struggling. So it was a fun point, because again, I was employed as the supply chain manager. And for that, I like having the data. So we started building everything, making sure that the reports matched reality, rebuilding financial reporting, looking at processes, looking at mix designs. And it was also, when they were a smaller company, it was very easy to manage. But now when they were successful in getting these different business rescue companies in, and they got them all at the same time, so it was like multiplying your business by 3. We weren't able to be everywhere at the same time, and it was a very small team. So we started looking, just in the background, started looking around. But we said, we're not going to pick a new system. We first want to see if we can get this thing working. And whenever we phoned the consultants, they said, well, we'll have to go and look. And I remember the CFO and I sat around the table and we said, oh, that's such an annoying term. We'll go and look. We started deciding we're going to go figure this thing out by ourselves, and started building reports, started finding easier, sitting again next to every single person in the company, saying, how can we make this quicker? What do you need help with? And then we built everything from there. And then at a certain point in time, we wanted to bring on a logistics company and another expansion that we're looking at that point in time. And it actually realized, no, the current system we're working on couldn't handle it. We needed to look for something else. And we opened the doors to everyone to come and do presentations. So we said, Oracle, SAP, Sage. We said, okay, we'll do Sage again, just a different version, because maybe the version wasn't right for the company. We invited Microsoft. There was another one. of course, Acumatica, but then there was another, I think there were 6 in total that we invited to come and do the presentation. And yeah, Acumatica just blew us away.
And this like maybe a few months after you started, or how long after you started?
I think it took 4 to 5 months for us to select a system, because we didn't want to rush. We didn't want to go through that again. And a lot of the people who did the previous implementation actually at that point in time decided they wanted, well, just prior to that, said they want to leave the company because they can't shake this system. So yeah, it took us a couple of months to get it. But Acumatica was actually one of the first people to respond. We sent out the request saying that we need people to come and do presentations, and we wanted the presentations to be in Aliwal North. So whoever wanted to come had to travel. Aliwal North is about 7 hours from Joburg. It's a 2-hour flight and then another 2 hours drive from Cape Town. So we wanted a partner that was committed. So I remember sending my request off to Acumatica thinking, oh, these guys might not even be in South Africa, but let's have a look. And got a response within a couple of hours, and then 12 hours later, within 12 hours, one of the partners of one of the VARs, Keto, the one I'm now working for also, they responded and actually drove out from Cape Town to Aliwal North and did a full presentation.
Wow. It sounds like that on-site component was very important, especially on the heels of a failed implementation of Sage. And, I'm curious, your comments earlier about when you're doing warehousing and logistics, being right there with the person walking through the warehouse, there's such a physical component to that. Now you're in the supply chain manager role, but I also heard you mention in that success story video, you mentioned like the multi-company, multi-branch, which made me wonder if you started getting into the accounting side as well, or did you just stay focused on the supply chain side?
Well, in company supply chain always report to finance. So the financial side is very important. And the CFO and I get along very well. So he also took me a bit under his wing saying, okay, well, it's great if you want a process to work, but here is the end result that we want to see. So we worked hand in hand to make sure that the process works firstly, and then secondly, that the financials that he wants to see and present ultimately to the banks and financial institutions and to the owners, the 2 entrepreneurs of the company, that is in the exact way that it's needed.
And to do that, like when you're getting into those details, you're dealing not just then with warehouse workers, you're dealing with office workers as well. Maybe talk about some differences between the approach of walking the warehouse and actually physically scanning those orders. Then you go try to learn from someone who's just doing office work. They're just maybe in a cubicle with their computer. Is you just go in and sit in the cubicle, or you find it easier to do that over a remote meeting? Maybe talk about differences in approach to warehouse worker versus office worker and understanding their processes.
If you work at a brick manufacturing company, it's not really warehousing, it's more open plan. So the brick manufacturing machines are outside in the open. They are building a fully automated machine at this stage. But if you want to learn about the product, you have to go and look at what they also do. So I mostly had the production manager staff. One of the production managers in Queenstown, which at that point in time was one of the biggest sites. He took me through the whole process on how they mix the cement, the dust, the chryso, which is just a strengthener, and sand. How they mix different components, what the different quantities are that they put in. And I think one of the key points are that Dukatole makes a high quality product. So that quality is one of the key things that they focus on. It's always been that way, and I think it's always going to be that way as well. So he took me through, if you make the mix in a different way, what the different outcomes are. And depending on the different times of the day, times of the year that you produce the product, and how quickly it strengthens and how long it takes to cure and get ready for the market. So yeah, we would do, I think in that point, we actually did stock counts together, because then, of course, they're not too busy with the machines and they can actually take you through the process, show you the different feels of different blocks. But it's brilliant if you look at someone and they can, or if you talk to someone, they can look at a block telling you, no, when we produce this, we use too much water. Next time we will use this much less, or this amount of less water. Or look at the different color variation on this block. Of course, everything gets plastered over, but to them, they also want to make sure that the color of the block is always the same when they produce it. And you would say, well, last week it rained, so there was a different type of sand in the river. So now that there's a different color of the block that they produced. We looked at how they test quality of the product, at what point in time it breaks. So we have a SABS, which is South African Bureau of Standards, and they certify the products because, of course, it goes into housing. So it needs to be of a certain standard before you can sell it. So on that, it was on the go, depending on what they were working on. They were also very technical experts on how the machine works. So if you do a small little tweak, what type of different block you can get. So they did blocks, bricks, pavers, lintels, precast products. So it was really interesting for me, who came from a pharmaceutical side, which was really small ingredients, to working in tons, for example, and large truck volumes. And then on the office side, normally if you're let's say, for example, a manager, you sit in an office somewhere. But to me, that's a very big disconnect, especially if you're operationally driven and more focused on supply chain. You actually want to, I'm used to being in the middle of everything. So to hear what people are doing. So I actually put my desk where all the sales and admin staff and everyone is sitting. It's a very small office. But then you can hear on the fly as something is happening, where there's a frustration, like, oh, I don't know how to do this, someone would say. And then you can actually just think, okay, well, I'm going to quickly make a small little process change for them and go sit next to them and show them how you can make something better. And then after a while, you start stimulating that trust, where people actually come to you saying, I have this problem, how can I fix it? Because if especially office staff working with big numbers, if they prefer to remain quiet, then you only see the problem end of the month or when you run your financials. And then you really have to be on top of your numbers, where if you have that trust of people saying, well, I can actually make my work quicker, faster, better, have an hour extra to spend with my family in the afternoon, then yeah, that's actually a great place to be in.
Oh, I love that motivator. I like using the same motivation. How about an hour extra to spend with your family? I like that. The carrot, not the stick.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely strike me as someone who likes getting in the middle of things. So even that's great advice, just physically locating your desk in the most chaotic area of the office, just so you can take in as much as possible and be there to assist with things that come up in real time. That's really cool. You're not just sitting in the corner office or off in a cubicle down the hall.
Well, I was in all of their shoes, so I know exactly what they've been through, or what they're going through. So yeah, and when you work, especially with large data sets, what you get from customers, and you have to analyze it and build a supply chain from there. And it's normally in Excel, and you would sit hours and hours sorting through data and cleaning it, sometimes swinging at your computer a little bit because it's the formula that you wrote doesn't want to work. Then, yeah, if you can spare someone else that hour or two of struggling, then why not?
And you mentioned earlier construction in addition to manufacturing. So you described the manufacturing process. My ears perked up though, and you said construction and manufacturing. To me, that's a real sweet spot for Acumatica. Maybe talk about the construction side of that business.
Yeah, so Acumatica, Dukatole bought a construction company, MMS. I was part of Business Rescue. So the owner saw an opportunity of not just producing the blocks, but also to build with the blocks. So in South Africa, we have this huge gap in housing. I think, and also in that success video, you'll hear that it'll take another 70 years just to get people who are currently in need of housing, not the future generation to come, but the current need. It'll take 70 years to build all those houses. And that, I think that's one of the goals of Dukatole as well, just to make sure people get homes. It's not just building the blocks, but also doing the housing. So in South Africa, you have RDP housing, which the government built. Well, they will get contractors to build it. And Dukatole and the MMS group was fortunate enough to be part of that, or is fortunate enough. And then our building, I think, 2 out of 3 houses in the Eastern Cape. I'll have to double check with the owners if that's still the latest figures. But yeah, so there's a lot of homes going up and a lot of people finally getting a proper roof over their heads.
How did you roll out then the Acumatica system between like finance and then what I'll call the inventory / shipping, receiving, the manufacturing, the construction? Those to me are 4 very separate pieces. Did you do it all at once or did you phase it in? And if so, in what order?
No, we started in 2019 with the construction side first. At that point in time, there was a really good financial manager within the construction company, and she took lead on how the construction side of it should work. I was more on a supporting learning role at that point in time, more focusing on the Dukatole side. And then in March 2020, we went live with Dukatole, the brick manufacturing side of things. And the March of actually, when was lockdown? What is it? 2021. Yeah, in the middle of lockdown, we went live with the logistics side. So trucks were still allowed in South Africa to operate at that point in time. So we actually went live with the trucking side. And then 6 months after that, we went live with more manufacturing. It was called Dukatole Central, which was based in Kimberley, Kuruman, and Bloemfontein. It was 3 extra manufacturing sites that the owners bought at that point in time. So yeah, we had the logistics, which ran on field services. In Acumatica, we had the manufacturing, of course, the brick manufacturing, and then the construction side, the MMS. But we did it mostly in project management, though. We didn't do it in the traditional construction module of Acumatica.
Project management, the project management module. Okay. And then you said field service as well.
Yeah, field services was used for the trucking.
Ah, okay. So you didn't it wasn't like projects with budgets and things. It was more like the field service component of Acumatica with the project management that you considered, that you use for the construction need.
Construction was just the project management. The field services was the logistics company.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you mentioned lockdown in there. So I'm curious, this is a theme that I keep probing about because I'm very interested in the softer side of things. So, you describe putting your desk right in the middle of everyone. You describe walking the warehouse with people, and you like really getting your hands dirty, literally with the bricks, to understand how things really work. How going live in the middle of lockdown, how did that change things? Or what was that like for you, where you couldn't be physically right there? You were having to interact a lot more remotely.
I think that was one of the first times I realized that, hey, I can actually do my work from anywhere. So, we were all phoning in on Teams. The consulting company, or Kido, the partner of Acumatica in South Africa, they were already working remotely, I think, for 3 or 4 years. That was their standard business. So they're based in Joburg and Cape Town. And for them, working remotely was normal. So they actually took us through how to operate and how to get everyone on the same page and keep everyone on the same page. We did most of our chats through Microsoft Teams, where of course you can share your screens, take everyone through the data, and do cleanups where it was needed. So it was a little bit more difficult than you would sitting in a room with everyone. But I think after that, the communication skills within the group also increased quite a lot. So it was easier to work with the different, I mentioned previously, the different branches are spread out. So anyone could then sit at any branch and we wouldn't have a problem working together. But since the construction companies also, the logistics companies, they were allowed to operate during lockdown. So the trucks were allowed to run, people weren't allowed to come to the office. We went live, and then 2 months later, the trucking industry were actually allowed to go back to their offices. So that also helped, where we could then sit and say, well, it worked, everything worked until now, how can we fine tune? So then we brought in the people aspect again of, okay, what can we fine tune? What can we make easier and better?
So then you moved to Quito in October 2021. And by the way, it's worth mentioning, you're on the list of 2022 Acumatica MVPs. So congrats on that. It looks like you've gone all in on Acumatica. You're now an Acumatica consultant implementing Acumatica. What made you decide to make that move into, all right, let's just go all Acumatica?
Well, I'm always focused on cost saving, right? So I looked at what I was spending my time on and how I can further automate and optimize. So I'm trying always to automate and optimize myself out of a role. I think that should be the key goal of everyone, to make sure that their processes can run even if they're not there. Most of my questions, most of my time was spent on Acumatica. I started doing all the training on the Acumatica Open University. And I phoned the Acumatica in the US saying, listen, I really want to do this online training and certification. And they said, no, you're a customer. It's actually more for partners, but you can follow Open University is there for everyone. You can, but I always felt there's a university for these VARs that I don't know about, that I want to be part of.
I've heard this story before from other people.
So I kept on pushing, saying, no, I want this. And the country manager phoned me, or the PAM in South Africa, and she said, yeah, sure, why not? We'll help you out. And at that point in time, I looked at my current job and thinking, well, I can actually support these guys a lot better if I know the system, if I have all the Acumatica knowledge, and if I dedicate myself to it. So that's when I realized I can actually save them some time. So now I work a full set of hours for them every month, working on optimizations and watering the plants or the seeds that we've planted. And they're now fully running on the system. They're happy with how things are working, and they contact me if they want to automate something, and I go visit them once a month, and then we just have a chat on what else we can do. But yeah, I actually replaced Acumatica and the optimization that we built replaced a lot of the work I used to do. So I think it was actually also a good career move for me to move out and also help other companies do this.
Quick time check. Are you able to go another 10 minutes? I know we're 2 minutes to the top of the hour here, our original schedule time.
No problem.
So you're still working with Dukatole. Did I pronounce that right? Help me out.
Dukatole.
Dukatole.
Yes.
But you're just doing it in a consulting capacity. And it sounds like that's still relatively new. That's since October 2021. And it might be too early on to tell, but I'm curious what you found so far working in a consulting capacity. Are you largely working remotely a lot more now? And if so, how do you then discover those things that need improving with your desk not right in the middle of it all?
Well, now I have the advantage of knowing how people think, right? So If we look at the financials, or if I'm building something for a new customer, I would go and check how Dukatole is actually still doing it, and always keep an eye on how they're entering data, and then make small suggestions. So, and as I learn new things, as I'm still busy with a lot of the courses. I think there's millions I still want to do. But as I go through a new course, I have this WhatsApp group, because I operate mostly in WhatsApp. I'll have a tips and tricks once a week saying, I know this is something that we looked at thinking, yo, it would be great if we can do this. I found the solution, here it is. And then as I continue to do that, I'll find people coming back saying, you know what, thanks for the tip today. Could you add this to our wish list? So I have this constant flow of people asking for wish list items. So yeah, the system is evolving with them. With the new customers I've signed on, we do exactly the same approach. So they can WhatsApp or email me at any time of the day. And then we brainstorm a little bit, and we implement. So, but to answer your question, I now work fully remotely, which is great because I'm a mom of a 2-year-old. So I also get to see my son grow up.
That's a really cool point about tips and tricks. Also a real cool point about getting to watch your son grow up. And I'm going to relate the two together. I love the benefits of working remotely as well. I find though that the challenge is sometimes it's hard to get things flowing in your direction, because you're not right there, right? You're not top of mind. You're not sitting right in the middle of it all physically. But I really like that tips and tricks point, because you have a mechanism now to reach out to a client. Maybe even, at some point you make it a group of clients, like a sort of like a user group or something, but you have a way where you're reaching out to them, and then you probably have an increased likelihood that they come to you with more things. Otherwise, you could just be out of sight, out of mind. I mean, because you did work there, you have that relationship with that client. But with other clients, I really like that idea of having, like, you could call it a lunch and learn, you could call it a tips and tricks session, you could call it a user group, something where you have an excuse to talk to them that's maybe not even necessarily billable, but you have a way to reach out and sort of shake the bushes to see if anyone has anything that they maybe wouldn't have come to you with otherwise. But hey, since we had this session, by the way, I wanted to bring something up. I really like that idea of having some kind of excuse or some kind of recurring gathering where it's maybe not, you don't necessarily know what they want to work on yet, but you're just sort of putting stuff out there. I don't know if I'm making sense there, but what do you think about that? Has that been helpful in your working remotely in connecting with people?
Yeah, especially everyone during the day, they're so focused on, I need to get my work done, I need to do this, I need to run that. This customer is hopping up and down, wanting something, that people don't always have time to go and sit and do a training session. So all these small minor tips and tricks, if you can get your customers to a point where they go, I don't like what I'm doing at this point. It's too many clicks, or I don't like to fill in the same thing in 2 different spots. If you can get them to that point where they just go, well, let's ask. It won't cost us anything. I mean, do you really want to build 2 seconds of thinking? Then yeah, to keep that door open. But of course, if you do news blasts, there's so much information out there at this stage. People have social media, WhatsApp, you don't really turn off. So if you do it, then try to stick to 1 to 2 minutes, as short as possible.
So for you, tips and tricks is like something you're just pushing out through WhatsApp, or it's a like live meeting that you're having?
It depends. So if I find something that I know relates to the order desk side, then I'll contact those order desk people directly. I'll send them a personal WhatsApp. If of course they allow me to do it, or I'll send them a short email. But if it's something that I feel that everyone could benefit from, then a WhatsApp group where only the admins can have a chat, or email blast also works.
And are you recording videos for those little 2-minute tips and tricks?
I do, for the things I find that they would not understand as well in like, for example, in a WhatsApp. We also have 11 different languages, official languages in South Africa. So sometimes it does help to explain something in a short video rather than sending a text and something get lost in translation.
And are these videos up on a YouTube channel or somewhere that I could send people a link to, or is it private videos that get sent?
No, it's normally private. It contains customer information, so I'll do it on their Acumatica itself, and I'll show them either something that they need to change, or something that could help them. So I normally work on their actual live data, because then I also find the message goes through easier. So it doesn't help that you speak about pharmaceutical products to a brick manufacturing company, because there's too much of a gap. So if you speak to bricks people, you talk bricks terms.
I like that. And I really like the combination there of what I would call, well, at least what my kids' school during COVID was calling asynchronous versus live, and that it is a combination of both. I think you need this kind of way to still connect with people on their own time, where they can just go watch that video whenever they're able to. But then you also need a mechanism for connecting live. Otherwise, the relationship goes cold, right? And I like those physical components there, where you especially like when you're implementing a system, like what you always tell people, we need to do testing. But if you just say we need to do testing and you leave it up to them, a lot of times it doesn't get done. But if you schedule time, get it on their calendar, you might not be there physically, but at least you have a physical block of time on their calendar to make sure the interaction is happening. And I like the combination of both. There's an asynchronous side to it. There's also a live side to it. You just have to get more creative when working remotely to stay connected with people, right? And I like those different things that you brought up.
I have to say, since Keto has been working remotely way before COVID and everyone started with this trend, it does help because the whole company is focused on that. So our team is always on Teams. If you're struggling with something, we'll have a quick chat, even with one of our team members who's based in, for example, Joburg or in Cape Town. So we're used to having this constant mini brainstorms throughout the day as well. So I do like to have that approach with my customers. And I think if you're busy with a go live and or UAT testing with a customer, try to meet as many people as you can, virtually or physically, within the company if time allows it, because then of course you as a consultant also get the opportunity to understand how they think, and if you understand how someone thinks, then it's so much easier to speak in the way that they would understand it.
Yeah, even to your point earlier, you're not just then maybe you send out that tips and tricks video later, but you're not just talking bricks or whatever specific thing they work on, but you're talking in a way that more closely matches the way they think.
Yeah, true.
Well, thanks for going over, Betty. I appreciate the time and kind of walking through your experience. I always like hearing people's backgrounds and how they got involved with Acumatica. Maybe give us a looking forward. What sounds like you're still 6 months into a new role. What do things look like for you looking forward? What are you working on? What are you interested in?
We just came out of 3 implementations, so it was a nice hectic March or February and March. So now I'm spending this week doing some training and getting all my certification up to speed. And yeah, for the future, I have some nice new customers lined up that I can demo for, which I find always interesting to find new companies, especially the supply chain side of me then gets really tingling. And sometimes I need to slam on the brakes, not to tell them how to run the company, of course, but just to give advice. So that's, I think, ultimately why I also joined this side of the business, is to show people that the process and the system can work together to help the people of the company.
Can I ask if NetStock is on your radar again? Since you like the supply chain so much, what's some of your ways that you see in the future of staying focused on that within the Acumatica world?
I'll have to review it again a little bit. I did build in some forecasting ideas into Acumatica for some of the previous people I worked with. I always like to, since I'm sometimes more focused on making the supply chain work, I sometimes like to jipper the system a little bit to give me more. So I'll have to view in the future where we can use NetStock. I really enjoyed the system when we worked with it previously, especially because it speaks to a whole range of different people and how they think, and it's easy to, even if you don't have extreme or a lot of a lot of knowledge and forecasting, then NetStock is a really easy way for people to learn. So yeah, maybe in the future.
But also, customizing existing Acumatica with the customization capabilities. Maybe you can handle the requirements inside Acumatica.
Yes, there's a lot you can handle inside of Acumatica. So I try to follow that approach before I link anything into it.
I'm also going to include a link to a Diginomica article that was posted recently. I'd love to get your thoughts on it. Just focusing on that forecasting area. It's definitely, I think, a weak area for Acumatica right now, at least out of the box. And there's some thoughts in there on what maybe they could do going forward.
Okay, it'll be interesting to read. Thanks.
Well, thanks again for your time today. And I definitely, when I get asked forecasting, supply chain questions, maybe I'll send people your way now that I know you're in a consulting role, and seems like your whole career path and your whole mindset and the way you like challenges and things, you seem like you've been doing consulting your whole career. And it's cool that you're now in an Acumatica consultant role officially. Seems like something that you're going to enjoy.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, that's it for now. We'll catch you on the next episode of AUGforums.com Real Talk. Thanks for listening, and take care.